we start. All right, so let's look at our questions for Philippians, and we'll go through that. Philippi was unique in that it contained two groups of people. What were the two groups? Both?
Jews and Gentiles.
There we go. Romans and Greeks is the right answer in this. Jew and Gentile is almost always the right answer for most questions. In this case, it's Romans and Greeks that are living there. Remember, there was a really small population of Jews, so much so that there wasn't even a synagogue in this town, and so we know that there was a very small population of Jews that were there. So they lived there merging those two cultures. We find that to be true in many of the cultures of the places that we talked about, because remember, Alexander the Great comes in and takes over all of the land, and Hellenism becomes a very, very important part worldwide. Greek becomes the world language, and Greek culture permeates everything when Alexander the Great takes over. So then when Rome comes through and begins to take over many of these places, when the Roman Empire comes through and takes over, then they keep a lot of that, what is called in the Bible, Hellenistic culture, and they simply add to it with their own. And then we find later on that even into Jewish culture, they absorb some of the Greek culture, and there are Hellenistic Jews that are talked about in the Bible. So all that is a merging together of culture. And in our lesson today with Colossians, we're going to see how dangerous that can be and the mess that can create. All right, number 2, having a Roman citizenship gave you certain privileges. What were some of the privileges?
No beatings.
No beatings. You're not supposed to be publicly flogged.
No imprisonment without trial.
You had to have a trial. Remember, our system is kind of modeled after the Roman system, and so many of the things we do today come from that. A fair trial. Less taxes.
They couldn't be crucified, I think.
Could not be crucified. They were not crucified.
Could appeal to Caesar.
Could appeal to Caesar if they didn't like the verdict they were given. So there was a great deal of benefit in having Roman citizenship, and we see that Paul will oftentimes use that. In some cases, he doesn't get a chance to. It appears here that they took him before he really even was able to give his own defense, and it isn't until after the fact that they find out that he's a Roman citizen. All right, since national pride was at an all-time high in Philippi, Paul reminds them that they are actually citizens of heaven, and above all else, their loyalties are to lie there. All right, Paul meets a group of women near a river who are worshiping God. He presents the gospel, and they believe. One of the women is especially important in the coming years of Paul's life. Who is she?
Lydia.
Lydia. And what does she do for a living? What is she known for? Seller of purple cloth. What's the big deal about purple cloth?
Very expensive.
Very expensive. We talked about the fact that you would not wear a purple garment. You would wear a strip of purple as a color on your hem, or a color on your sash, or some beautiful, piece of it. But it would be far too expensive to wear a garment. Why would that be?
Because the dye is hard to get.
Because the dye was so difficult to get. And the fact that, remember we talked about those stinky little snails that they have to squeeze them after they die and get a drip of purple juice that comes out. There was a madder flower that they could use also. And today in Colossians, we're going to find out that they were known for something purple too. So that'll be interesting to add to our education on purple dye. All right, so why is Lydia so important to Paul?
She was rich, so she housed him and fed him and
Okay.
took care of him.
She housed him and fed him and took care of him, and
She also
Supported him.
brought a lot of people in, didn't she?
she
Because she was
had
prominent
a
in the
church
community.
there in her house. She was very well known in the community.
And she supported them throughout their mission there.
Good. 14 years that we know of, she supports Paul in his ministry and sends gifts. Paul is going to use this little small group of primarily women, from what we understand, He's going to use them as an example to churches that he writes to, their generosity in taking care of him. And so Lydia would have played a big part in that because of the great wealth that she would have been able to use to do that. So it's pretty amazing to think about some of the larger congregations were actually told you should be more like this little group of women who were so small that they met by a river. Why would they meet by a river? Not the park. Living water. Because that was very important to the ritualistic things that they were going to do. And any water that moves is considered living. If it's in a pool, stagnant, it has no entrance and no exit, then it's dead water. And so that's the reason that they were there. Yes, ma'am.
So there is a river that runs through there and
Yes.
a Roman road that goes right to it, so they claim that's the spot where,
Cool.
whether it is or not, but
Very cool.
you
Well,
can,
at least it gives you an idea of what it would look like, right? Which were many of those traditional spots, that's what it is. That's a good
traditional,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. While trying to reach out to the community, a slave girl is going to cause some disruption. What does she do, and how does Paul handle it? What does she do first?
Fortune teller.
She's a fortune teller. And how does she begin to bother Paul?
Follows him, calling out that they are worshipers and followers of God.
Okay, is that true?
It's true.
It is true, isn't it? She says, these men are believers in God and they are teaching us the way to be saved. Was that true? It was, but Paul was very annoyed by that. Why?
Was it a mocking voice?
Because what?
Was it a mocking voice?
A mocking voice? Well, it could be demonically possessed, right? Any other thoughts on that?
He didn't want a demon on his side.
There you go. There you go. The same reason that Jesus told the demons that came and spoke and said, this is the Son of God, and he said, be quiet. Because you don't want those kind of people on your side. You don't want those kind of people speaking up for you. And Paul needed to stop her as soon as he could. So how does he handle it?
Call the demon out.
He did what?
Call the demon out.
Okay, he cast the demon out, didn't he? Be gone. Get out of her. The demon was giving her the power to be a fortune teller. So what does that tell us about astrology and fortune tellers and all of that? We need to be very careful, right? That little place on the edge of town in Jamestown by CNC Taqueria there. Every time I go by there, I say a little prayer. Lord, just let that be gone. You know that place that burnt down, that bar that burnt down? I used to pray for that every time I went out of town. Lord, just let that be gone. That needs to be gone out of our community. And one day I went by and it was burnt down. I was like, oh my goodness. Thank you, Lord. I just didn't see that coming. That's amazing. So anyway.
Mysterious ways.
Yeah. And so Paul casts the demon out, which would be a very good thing, but it's going to get Paul into a tremendous amount of trouble. Why did he get in trouble for casting that demon out?
Because her owners quit making money.
So they're charging money for that little gift, aren't they? And so when that stops, then they lose their source of income, and they are going to take Paul and drag him in front of the magistrates. Do you remember what they said the crime was that he did? They didn't say casting out a demon, because the Romans don't care about that. So what did they say? Remember? They're doing things that are against Rome. What were they doing that was against Rome?
Decreasing their profits.
Well, they didn't have to pay taxes on that anyway, so come on. But it was obviously a trumped up charge, right? And so it didn't make any sense, but yet they take them and they beat them severely, it says, and throw them in the innermost parts of the jail. When they're in the jail, they're even, remember what they did with their
Chain
feet?
their stocks, yeah, their chains.
They're chained and their feet are in stocks, so that they can't even move while they're in the center part of the jail. Boy, that was a tremendous crime, wasn't it? That punishment was equal to something really severe, the casting out of a demon. And so while he and Silas is with him, and while they are being held in jail, something miraculous happens. What happens?
Earthquake.
An earthquake. And what is so miraculous about this earthquake?
It was just at the jail.
Just at the jail. Isn't that amazing? No information whatsoever that shows that anywhere else in town was felt this earthquake. So severe that what happens?
It broke them out.
All their doors are open, broke their chains, all their doors fly open, and yet the men are going to respond in an amazing way. What do?
They don't go, they stay.
Can you believe that?
No.
That you're held in a jail cell and the earthquake happens, your chains fall off of you, the door flies open, and you stay.
They're so stunned.
Isn't that an amazing thing? That God actually had that whole scenario because he needed to work with the jailer. God needed to work with the jailer. And so he provided exactly what needed to be done. That's the story of the earthquake is miraculous enough, but when you add the little details to it, boy, you see God, like you were talking, Marilyn, you see God's hand in every step of the way with that. So how does this change Paul's circumstances?
Chance to witness to the jailer,
Okay,
and all of his family believed.
okay, all right. And he gets to come out, and,
Insist on his citizenship rights.
okay. So he gets to come out and they go, oh, just, mosey on your own way. You're a little bit of trouble. And mosey on down the road. And he goes, no, you did something against us. If you want us to leave, you publicly escort us out of town so that everyone in this community can see that we are innocent of what you charged us with. That's not stated in there, but that's what the idea of escorting us out of town would be. The community there needed to know that Paul and Silas were innocent in what had been charged against them, and so Paul was insisting on that. Which chapter of Acts tells the story of Paul and Philippi?
16.
16. Very good. Paul has many facets of his personality show up in his writings to the different congregations. So when he was talking to the Corinthians, he was a teacher in teaching mode, giving them lots of new info. He was very upset with the Galatians. Remember the letter of tears and all that we studied about with that. And like a general, he prepared the Ephesians for a battle in the world. What is his overriding theme in the letter to the Philippians? Joy. Isn't that amazing? Aren't you thrilled for Paul that he gets an opportunity to have that moment? I am. After we've gone through some of the things that we've seen him go through, it is so thrilling for me to see that as a teacher, as a pastor for those people, as the apostle sent to begin their churches and to lead them on the way, he has a moment where he gets to experience joy in what he's brought to these people. So why is he so joyful with them? What are some of the reasons?
It's a very generous church.
Very generous. We spoke about that, and they supported his ministry. He talks to them about their great fellowship, remember, with one another and how they were doing all of that. What about their contentment?
You can choose to be happy.
Okay.
Regardless of your circumstance.
Okay, and it appears that they were, and he was commending them for that. That in whatever circumstance we're in, trial, tribulation, war, aggression, whatever it is, whatever our circumstance, we get up every morning, we put on our armor. Once we put our armor on, we say, today, I choose joy.
Amen.
I choose joy in my life. No matter what comes, I choose joy because I know what the end game is going to be here. No matter what comes in the middle, the end game, I know what it is. And so I'm going to choose joy today. And that's what Paul is reminding them of, and that's what they're doing, and that makes him very happy. Number 8, go ahead.
I was just gonna say they were also concerned for him.
Yes.
He shared in his troubles.
Yes, and he appreciated that, didn't he?
Yeah.
Especially after, remember the last books we talked about where they were not even standing up for him and not even defending him to the false teachers that had came through. So you're right, he was very pleased with that. Number 8, I realized I don't think we talked about. So unless somebody counted them themselves, did anyone count them?
I tried to, so whether the whole thing, Jesus Christ, or just I got 36.
36. What'd you get, Trudy?
40.
40. Very good. That is the exact answer that I.
Ding, ding, ding.
40. And you were very close. You must have just barely missed a couple. The point is, and of course it's going to depend. Are you reading the New King James Version, or the King James Version, or the NIV, or the, whatever version, your ESV, whatever you're reading, it's going to change a little bit. But the point that I wanted to make is this book was 4 chapters long. And 40 times in this book of joy, the name Jesus Christ comes up. Isn't that amazing? Do you see any tie-in with that? It's just pretty amazing. All right, the goal for these believers is to become more Christ-like every day. He encourages them, sharing with them the power that God gives them to grow. Do you remember, I was trying to see if I had my paper with that on it. What we talked about, the different ways to become more Christ-like? I had that somewhere. Yeah, here it is. Do you remember what we talked about? It was on your page. Surrender to God, living a life that is dead to sin, continually growing in spiritual maturity. So those are the ways that we can every day wake up and become more Christ-like. All right. Our own joy should never be dependent upon our circumstances. And every day we make a choice. Isn't that a wonderful lesson to keep remembering? I think that's just amazing. I love it every time that comes up in our study. All right, let's look at the book of Colossians. I'm going to stop and turn this off first.